From 1948 to 1992, young South African boys and girls grew up in a governmental system known as apartheid. The focus of this documentary is the way two different people of different races grew up in different areas with different lifestyles. We will be interviewing Tony Everts and Cheryl Small.
I don't think I would have done anything differently, as that was the way we were brought up, and apartheid was just a way of living at that point in time. I think that if the tricameral parliament included the vast majority of people, namely the blacks, I'm sure things might have worked out differently.
I don't know if I would have done anything differently. I think if I think back, I would have liked to have been a bit more informed at the time. I think living in the country where I was living in, where I had very little exposure to what was going on in the outside world, very little to compare our country to. If I just think, when I finished school, and I did really well academically at school, but if I think back, my general knowledge of the bigger wide world that there was really very limited. Whether that was largely because we were excluded from a lot of stuff in our country, our traditional little Springbok radio station which only told us certain things, no TV till late 1970s as I was finishing school, and then again just very much local TV, not much exposure to international news. In hindsight, I actually had very, very little knowledge of what was going on in the bigger wide world out there. So it's great that the young people today have that opportunity, to question things more openly, and to have something to compare things to. I think perhaps if I had understood things a bit better, I may have questioned things a bit more.
By few ways, by boycotting. There was at one stage we boycott buses. I had to walk to school for about 20 kilometers, but boycotts and other means also.
No, I didn't. As I said earlier, I think just, if I think back really, my life was fairly comfortable. It didn't impact dramatically on my life as a younger person. And I think by the time I really got to fully understand what apartheid was really about, and just how much it was impacting on a larger group of people's lives, things had started to change already, and we were heading towards a more democratic country at that stage. I didn't resist it anyway.
I think that the policy of independent homelands was not a good idea, as it created puppet states, what it was called at that point in time.
I personally don't think it's a good idea at all. I think there was very much more behind that than just giving people their independent homelands. Segregating people in that way, moving them away from a bigger community, I don't think it solves anything. I think people need to learn to live together, to respect each other's cultures, and there will be difficulties. We are different, and we need to learn to kind of give and take in all situations. But I don't think it was a good idea at all.
At that point in time, I was working for the Old Mutual already. I've been working for Old Mutual for 40 years, and it was not easy coming home from work with tear gas and the riot police running all over the place. It was interesting.
I must be honest, I had to think very carefully about this, because I just have a very, very vague recollection of it. It clearly didn't impact on my life in any significant way, otherwise I would have remembered. I do remember that there was difficulties, and there were times in certain areas were declared emergency areas, but for me it really didn't make too much difference in my life.
I did not vote in the tricameral parliament elections, the reason being that due to the vast majority of blacks in South Africa being excluded from the tricameral parliament.
No, I don't recall voting in the tricameral parliament elections. My knowledge of the, even of the tricameral parliament is also fairly limited. I know that there were the three groups, and it included the whites, the coloureds, and the Indians, and the blacks were excluded from that. But as I said earlier, I was really not particularly involved or particularly interested, actually, if I think about it. So it's probably unlikely that I would have voted at that time.
Mentioned previously, being at Livingston, we were very aware of apartheid. We were one of the first schools to have boycotts, and that was the beginning of the 1976 riots in Cape Town.
I was aware of the word apartheid, and I vaguely had an idea of what it meant. But I think because I had never been accustomed to anything else, to me that was just the way life actually was. I never really questioned things much, just because I didn't think that it was any different anywhere else. The whites and non-whites, as I said, literally lived separate lives completely. My only interaction with, as a young child growing up with a person of another colour, really was our domestic worker who lived with us and who was actually part of our family. And the funny thing is, when I think about it, we never really treated her differently as in that way. She was part of the family, although there was very definitely I think even so much from her side, she refused to sit at our table and have supper with us. She insisted that she sit separately. And I think that's probably just the way she was brought up. She was from a farm, very rural. She had the utmost respect for my mom and dad. I remember when TV first came out, I was, I think, grade 11 at the time. She wouldn't join us in the lounge and watch TV with us. She would sit in the passage and watch from the passage. She kind of felt that wasn't her place. Yet we were all on first name terms, and to this day we're friends with her. We helped arrange her wedding. She came to our weddings. I mean, she's a woman 60 years old now, and we're still friends. So I don't remember there ever being a feeling. I never felt as a child that she was inferior to me in any way. She was just part of our family as well.
Apartheid 1980s was quite interesting for me, being heavily involved in the 1976 riots, attending one of the top coloured schools in Cape Town, namely Livingston High. So it was a different ball game for me.
I must admit that in the early 80s, I was still in my early 20s. I was a newly married woman with young children. I was not really very involved in politics at all. I'd grown up and lived amongst mainly white people most of my life. And that was really actually all I was accustomed to. I didn't know much else. I'd been born into the era where there had been apartheid. So it was something that, as far as I was concerned, was just the way it was. I wasn't even really fully aware that in the rest of the world, this type of life wasn't the way it was. It was just like that here. As I said, the suburb we lived in was really mainly white people. We went to white-only school. When I came to work, I worked with white people. The only interaction I had with people of any other colour was, there were a few coloured people who worked here, and they were mainly messengers or people who collected policy files. And I don't recall ever even working with a single black person in the first few years that I worked.
From the interviews, we can tell many things. However, one of the most significant things is the difference in lives these two people had growing up. For example, non-white people lived in poverty and far away from urban areas, and white people lived in big houses close to the city. Often, white people went to prestigious schools with qualified teachers, whereas non-whites went to school where teachers sometimes did not even arrive. Even though apartheid has ended, we can see that segregation is still present.